Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen, and with me is Ted Haycraft.
Yes, we have returned.
We have returned. When we'll be back is up in the air. When it's been a long,
quite the abyss. We've
quite the time away. On today's episode, we will be talking would you call it controversial 2022 Sight and Sound British Film Institute Best Films of All Time poll.
Yeah, that's what prompted this. Really got us going here.
Yeah. But first off, what have you seen recently, Ted?
I've seen. I finally caught up a lot of the theater. I saw She Said and Bones and All, and the Ticket to Paradise and Hotel. They're all good. They were all solid. There's a lot to talk about all of them. But you know what I really want to talk about? I caught up to. I don't think it's available here in America, or maybe it's streaming somewhere. Is a documentary by the Cinema Paradiso director on Ennio Morricone.
Really?
Ennio. I loved it. It's amazing.
Well, it's right up your alley.
Well,
but
yeah, it's over 2 hours. It's by a filmmaker that worked with Ennio.
Yeah.
Several.
That's a Cinema Paradiso score is a great score amongst others. Obviously.
Yeah, and it goes. It covers Ennio's. And you think, how are you going to do this? Because it's it's music and just show. But he does a really good job and covers all the bases. And I got Ennio was alive when he did it, and Ennio sat down. It's like the Dielman Scorsese documentary.
There's always that vibe that Morricone got a little not ornery, but just kind of like not towards the end of his life. He was definitely doing less American scores, obviously.
Yeah, I think he's a unique. Well, you're going to get this in this documentary.
Okay.
About his personality, about it. His wife doesn't talk in it, but he had a strong wife behind him that supported him and could do what he wanted to do. The whole thing about the absolute music versus soundtrack movie music. And when I say the absolute, that's a word they came up with. That's new to me, but it's like modern symphony music.
Yeah,
it's created. They were using that. What do you call that? Just if Beethoven was alive and just doing symphonies and not doing movies.
Yeah, I know like a lot of classical people when they talk about John Williams are just like, this is legitimately good classical music versus it's just not movie music, but it always has that functionality of good movie music.
That's addressed in this documentary too, a lot, and it's really fascinating. I loved it, and I highly recommend that. Eastwood shows up, Tarantino shows up.
Oh, nice.
A bunch of people show up for it too.
I have a friend of a friend who's sat down with Morricone for afternoon for a work related thing. He had some eccentric stories about it, but they are not mine to tell.
But yeah, like I said, I was glad to see this with him before he left us, because he shows him like his exercise he does, his regimen, and then it shows him playing on the piano and talking and his hands moving. It's just really very insightful.
Okay. My big thing I just finished watching the Senior, the Robert Downey Sr. documentary. It's good. It's touching.
Yeah, I just saw that in somewhere, an article on that.
Yeah, no, I think it just went up on Netflix on Friday. It was good.
Sight and Sound, because I was looking at the site.
Because fair enough. But the movie I kind of wanted to talk to you about that I saw recently. I think if we do a few more episodes consistently coming up, one constant thing we're going to constantly be bringing up is Quentin Tarantino's cinema speculation book and how we both. Yeah. I
oh my gosh, we do. I mean, I want to talk about it. I mean, I could talk about it forever.
Well, there's a few big. I mean, it obviously expanded my watch list a lot, but there was one of the things I first dived into was like obvious movies that. Just for some reason, he has a list of like near perfect movies in there, and on that list were Dirty Harry and Death Wish, and I watched both those for the first time since coming back. But Death Wish is the one I wanted to talk to you about. That was not what I was expecting.
There's so many different. It's fascinating to. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like all me and stuff, but he has a term that I use a lot with you guys when I talk to you guys about a perfect film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is such a thing as perfect films. I mean, and then I remember one of my perfect films is North by Northwest.
Okay.
And I showed up at the library not too long ago, and so this one guy from the book broker showed up, and he's like sitting there, and he's like almost like, prove it to me, this is a perfect film. And he pointed out the fact about the little kid.
The kid anticipating the gunshot and grabbing his ears.
He goes, well, you can see that. And it's like, no, I'm not trying. there's no such thing as a, if you're going to be that literal with the word perfect.
You're what you think is enjoyment and I think is enjoyment might be two different things at this
Yeah.
point. Like, what is that? Is that what threw you off?
Yeah. It was like, don't,
It's a very literal
yeah.
interpretation.
And so I was glad to see Quentin with something like Jaws. Obviously, I think almost a lot of us agree that Jaws is a perfect film.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool because we were going to kind of get into this with this.
We are definitely going to get into
tonight's
this.
subject. But yeah, so I thought that there's so much more in that book.
Well, so the Death Wish for things I wanted to talk about were, I mean, some of the movies that he made me watch or mentioned to watch were things that like I think I would have dismissed out of just kind of this odd Nixonian, like he has a passage where he talks about how people inaccurately call Dirty Harry a fascist movie.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of topics about racial politics in the 70s. Like has a great bit on why Taxi Driver. Harvey Keitel's character, Harvey Keitel shouldn't have been in the movie. It was written for a black pimp, and it should have stayed a black pimp.
Which makes me think Eric Braesmith and I, the USI film professor, we're
Former
just
guest.
talking about the new Elvis Mitchell black documentary, which I have not seen. You have?
I
Right?
have, yes. It's very good.
But and Eric thought it was really good, so I'm dying to see it. But we're still going. Why aren't that much black element in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
No, we talked about that on our novelization episode too.
So,
but the thing about Death Wish that I want to talk to you specifically about, which I did find, I guess I haven't read much on Death Wish, but it was still an element I did not see coming. I thought was interesting was the trip out west is what motivates him to get a gun, and then this whole like using Bronson's Western roles. Interestingly, is like have to be like because I knew that he was like this like fallen liberal who it was like this. It's supposed to be that play on that joke of a liberal is a conservative who hasn't been mugged yet or something like that, and but just the cowboy ethos and like old Western law enforcement, like that was a big part of the movie.
Yeah,
I mean, it had any of the sequels worth it?
Well, there's all kind of interesting defenses for the sequels. I mean, I was recently I was so surprised. Quinn's a big defense defends all the J. Lee Thompson programmers he did with Bronson. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've always just kind of just like dismissed them and got like, oh boy, another J. Lee Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to stop and look at it again. And and of course Michael Winter did the second Death Wish. But then what about did you ever hear the term Vegematic? Revenge-o-matic.
I think that's Vegematic. I think that's Quentin Tarantino's term that he's had personally and he's been trying to popularize.
I guess so, because I've never heard that till this book, I think.
Well, I mean, one of the issues I've had with almost only issue I've had with his filmmaking, Tarantino's filmmaking output has been the reliance on the revenge stories, but I mean, but
look at all the ones they're doing on their podcast. Him and Avery,
No. I mean, he's making the point that it's a big part of film writing and film storytelling. Apparently, a lot of people in Hollywood want to have revenge against somebody. Dive into the let me start the preamble. So we're on a group chat thread, and I saw the link, posted it, and I went on the endless rant about because I saw this list and I was like, what I saw wasn't a change. There wasn't any changes, and I was just like, man, this is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic that is cinema. Like all these academics just had the exact same fossilized cocoon movies that they and then you casually are like, this is the 2012 list, not the 2022 list.
Yeah, I was kind of curious, and I went over to the Sight and Sound Facebook page, and I'm like, we're going to announce in 2 days. I'm like, oh.
And then, then when the inevitable list came out, all those complaints went out the window very quickly.
Yeah, very. I was shocked. I think there was a shockwave heard around the world on this thing amongst film critics and film fans. Joseph McBride faced most about it, and Schrader's quote, and there's all kinds of.
So let's get to the core of it. The big issue is that there was a new number one. It is not Vertigo anymore. It is not Citizen Kane, which had it for years, but it's Jeanne Dielman.
Yeah,
the Chantal Ackerman film from 1975.
right. And that's not even the official title. It's much longer.
Oh yeah, no, and
I can't even. I'm not even trying to pronounce
I
it.
we I was going through the math. We've mentioned it on one episode of the entirety so far, and I had to look up how to pronounce it just because. Well, okay, so we're going to be talking about a lot of foreign films here. We should put it out of the way. I think there's going to be a very interesting thing. You and I watch a lot of movies, and we have to be really open about how many of these movies we have not seen, and also being how many movies we're going to butcher the pronunciations of.
Yes, especially me. I'm known for that.
Yeah.
I'm not bragging, and mostly I did my count. I think we're right. We're one off. You and I. I think I did. You said 80.
I've seen 80 of the 100, and I've seen like about 41 of the top 50.
79. I've seen 79 of them. When I went through it, I'm pretty sure that's.
And then, and when it came to one of the new top 10s, Claire Denis' Beau Travail, it's on HBO Max, so I almost watched it yesterday.
You did watch it?
No, I almost did. I'm going to watch it.
We brought that in. Tracy Cinema Society back in the day brought that in. I remember I remember scratching my head over it. And of course, the funny thing is you and I watch so many films. We read a lot of books. We read a lot of articles. A lot of the films I've never seen, haven't seen. I know. It seems like I almost know them though.
Sure. Yeah.
There's always a lot of that. Growing up, I would read essays on Bergman and Fellini and just imagine what these films were like, and now I've seen them, or I have them on my shelf ready to watch.
Well, there's a lot of these movies also where I may admire the director, and I may have a completely different favorite film from that director.
Exactly, yeah.
But in the movie itself, I'm like, oh, I think I saw it in college, and it almost feels like an assignment that I maybe don't remember some. And then some of them, I'm like, oh no, I remember. There's this great sequence in there too that I love. Yeah.
Right.
So for the central controversy, you mentioned the Paul Schrader quote on Facebook, and I mean Alex Ross Perry kind of did a documentary on with big chunks of it that had to do with him. So entertaining on Facebook. The classic, if you know the Simpsons meme, old man yells at cloud. Yeah, Schrader is equal parts entertaining, equal parts telling kids to get off his porch. I'll read the full quote. I'm not going to actually the last sentence, but. For 70 years, the Sight and Sound poll has been a reliable, if somewhat incremental measure of critical consensus and priorities. Films moved up the list, others moved down, but it took time. The sudden appearance of Jeanne Dielman in the number one slot undermines the Sight and Sound poll's credibility. It feels off, as if someone had put their thumb on the scale, which I suspect they did. As Tom Stoppard pointed out in Jumpers, in democracy, it doesn't matter who gets the vote, it matters who counts the votes. By expanding the voting community and the point system, this year's Sight and Sound poll does not reflect a historical continuum, but a politically correct rejiggering. Ackerman's film is a favorite of mine, a great film, a landmark film, but its unexpected number one rating does it no favors. Jeanne Dielman will, from this time forward, be remembered not only as an important film in cinema history, but also as a landmark of distorted woke appraisal. And I hate it when people use woke as a pejorative negative, but all right, I put that in.
Well, I know the last sentence. That's a friend of mine goes, and there Paul becomes a fascist.
And I'm not happy with my first reaction to it, but my very, very first reaction was similar. It's tricky because you want to talk about this, you want to be supportive of women filmmakers and not sound like a misogynist. But a few years ago, Scorsese had come up with a list of for his daughter of films like This Is What I Want You to Inspire, and didn't have any female filmmakers on it. And a thread I was on, one friend started complaining about that, and I went on this rant. Look, the current stats are women comprise, at least in America, 50.5% of the population, meaning men are 49.5% of the population. So in those theories, women should be directing 50.5% of movies. But if you're familiar at all with San Diego State University has this place called the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film. They've been doing a lot of studies for the last 15 years. In terms of critics, the new 2022 study says that men critics outnumber women critics 2-1. Men, according to Rotten Tomatoes right now, 69% of critics are men, and 31% are women, and 0.3% are non-binary, and that's down 4% from 2020. And directors are crew people: directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors, cinematographers. Women are only 34% of those in narratives, and 43% of those in documentaries. So But in theory, if we did have the 50% and women had made up 50% of the movies made up to this point, then we should have better representation.
Right, but the history, the history shows that we don't have, and it's unfortunate. We all know, we can all agree. This is,
It's a loss.
It's a couple of white guys here talking, and we don't, we don't want to.
Yeah, let's in the guy's part particularly. Let's focus, like, definitely in the guy part.
But this is what we have to play with. We want it to be better. It should be more fair and share, but this is what we got. Well, and we're trying to correct it and trying to catch up and trying to make it, So do you rewrite history to make this list, or?
Well, but and the thing I've been thinking of since my first reaction isn't this how you do the corrective? I mean, your first reaction might be that yes, a thumb is on the scale, but it's also you bringing up the successive works of women that and place them in a higher place. Because I mean, a big chunk of this is because of the expansion of more critics. It went from like something like 600 to over 1,300 critics for participating in this poll.
We may have to do a sequel to this episode. Just as, have you watched the film? Have you seen the film?
Which film?
The number one, Jeanne.
Yeah.
See, yeah. I haven't.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me as a film fan like you. No. I'm not that you haven't seen it. It's just that you picked that number one, and like there's a majority of people I know who haven't seen it.
Exactly. And the minute it came out on the minute it came out on Blu-ray on Criterion,
it's a great Criterion Blu-ray.
I ran out. I grabbed it, bought it right away. Really excited because I had read about it. I knew about it.
It's right up there.
And I was thinking, okay, this is great. Then I just never carved out the time for it, and I'm guilty about that. So I'm hopefully I'm glad you saw it. I'm glad you've seen it, so that we have some justification here on talking about it.
I haven't seen a lot of Chantal Ackerman, but I have seen that one.
But I have, I obviously I knew about her, I read about it, knew about this film, and I just was surprised. And I think do you see it as it was impactful, innovative? Was it
yes,
a visual, artistic difference that it caused?
I mean, I think you have a movie that, as far as I could tell, was never mentioned in any of the previous polls, taken to number one.
Well, it was 35. I thought the previous one
in 2012.
I think so.
Okay.
And it jumped up from 35 to 1.
Okay. It's a big jump. I mean, but I mean that's not unprecedented. So. All right, there's two things I have specifically I want to go over, but the first one is I had this idea of, are you familiar with Harold Bloom, the literary critic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was going to get his book, The Western Canon, and find a definition of good canon, and I kind of perused the opening, and I've always, Harold Bloom has a bad reputation in my eyes from other authors, like talking down just about how academic snobbery, and so I was reading this, and it was very, very academic, but quoted in the book is another canon critic that he talks about, Sir Frank Kermode. He wrote the book Forms of Attention, which he says, canons which negate the distinction between knowledge and opinion, which are instruments of survival, built to be time-proof, not reason-proof, are of course deconstructible. If people think there should not be such things, they may very well find the means to destroy them. So basically, when we come up with lists, they're mean to be taken down. But also later in this book, Harold Bloom kind of makes the point that on a basic level, a canon is designed as either educational or recreational, as there's only so much time we're going to be alive. There's only so much works of art you can look at. This is a guidepost of what
guideline. It comes down to being a guideline.
Finishing this up, I found another quote from Kermode that was actually more on point. So he'd been going around doing lectures about canons, and he found that he was getting a lot of hostility, mainly for canons and a lack of gender in these canons was tacitly anti-feminist. But then later he started coming around to this, because by definition, canons are celebrations of works that have already been celebrated, and then you're trying to figure out which one deserved it, merited celebration. And if men have primarily been writers, the main writers for years, then it's going to be celebration of men, and women are going to be marginalized in it. It was a question of, like, is it okay to switch a canon this fast? Does it become a credibility issue too, or? And
also, did you see they expanded the electorate a lot more people voting this
Yeah,
time.
as I was saying earlier, it was like
Huge-
600 to 1,300, something
Huge
like that.
expansion. So that gives you a lot more viewpoints. And they also said they didn't. Sight and Sound, I think the criterion for voting, if the film made a personal impact on you, you could vote for that. So that's, how much you carve the guidelines for your voting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's not like the thumb on the scale. Like, there's no. It was a collective thing. It's kind of like the Academy expanding to younger voters too with the Oscars.
Right. Of course, I'll look forward to the. It's probably gonna be on the website at some point. My print issue will be coming here in the mail soon.
It's funny we're doing this without having looked at the print issue and everyone else's.
Yeah, and all the top tens. Yeah, the American issue has my subscription copy runs behind because it's coming from England, obviously. But this goes like when David James had me on his radio show. He's a local former news anchor, and he does a radio show on the PBS station.
Yes, your top 10.
And he goes, bring me your top 10 film list. And I've said, well, David, let's do this. I'll bring you a top 10, but it's gonna be my personal top 10, and it's not gonna be. I almost have a separate top 10 where it's Citizen Kane, Lawrence Arabia, certain Hitchcock, certain one. I mean, it seems like I almost could divide that up because I mean, to me they're obvious. A lot of these things.
Well, okay, let's also go into the history of this list. There's a reason we're talking about this list in the internet age where lists are everywhere. And
remember the AFI list came out? They made the big deal about those. And,
sure.
And they were network specials.
There was a quote I found of Roger Ebert, and I think this was influential for me paying attention to this list. But he said that most film lovers pay attention to this list, the Sight and Sound British Film Institute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the diehards, I got to... When you speak of what level of film fandom, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who love films. They don't even know what Sight and Sound is.
Sure. Well, but so anyway, when they first started this list, they it started because there was this thing called the Brussels referendum, and it would have been in like around the first Sight and Sound list was 52. The Brussels referendum was before the first Sight and Sound list, and that was filmmakers. And so Sight and Sound started this list like, well, let's get critics together to do this. And it just seemed like it was like the first one point at one of the preambles to one of the lists made the point that pre-video, much less around the 50s, there wasn't even a ton of literature on film history at that point. They mentioned two specific works. Paul wrote the Film Till Now from 1930, and then there's 1938, I think it's a French one, History of the Film. And like those were two big books that would have been around in 1952. But otherwise, you have to rely on a critic right then because they're the only ones who've seen all this stuff. And going back to the repertory cinema for that.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. For years and years still, video stores came along, the video world and the home video market, everything. I was just... only time I've ever got to see some film close to a Sight and Sound list type film would be on a campus, maybe on a college campus, or if I got up to Bloomington or something like that. Not get a college campus, but it was rare, and I just read about them and have books on them. So I had an encyclopedia film book in my 8th grade graduation. My dad gave me, and I would look at all this stuff, Fellini and Truffaut and Godard, and I would look up at my favorite stuff, but I'd also look at other things. I'm thinking, when am I ever going to see these, and what are the good ones to see? And they must be important if they're in here in this book.
When was the first time you remembered the Sight and Sound list or heard about this and did it have the same reputation as something like Ebert had suggested for you?
Yeah. Ever since I've been subscribing or buying Sight and Sound for since the 90s.
Okay.
Late 80s, 90s.
So you would have been around for the 92 poll. This is every 10 years, and it's on the second year of a decade.
Right. And so, yeah, and it's a great guide. To my mind, I keep on thinking I'm going to catch up and at least see these 100 before I pass away, which won't be too soon, maybe. But,
well, you only have 21 more now.
Yeah, that's true. For this list, it's not that bad.
Not that bad, huh?
Yeah,
so I'm going to take a second on this, but one little exercise I want to go through is there's not a ton of newer movies in like Mulholland Drive, In the Mood for Love are probably the newest ones in the top 20.
Yeah, and what
I think those are the only ones in this century.
What do you make of Mulholland Drive being that high?
When's the last time you rewatched Mulholland Drive?
It's been a while, but
Every time I rewatch it, that movie gets better and
it's better
better.
than Blue Velvet?
I think so. I think
Even though this thing's a hodgepodge of a TV pilot.
I know, which is why it's odd that it feels so organic. But I remember the last time I watched it, I was like, it had the David Lynch feel of surrealism and rationality, but it also it's just like a straight story, like not that pun not intended. It just felt it felt like that ending that was tacked onto the pilot made total sense.
But
it was really well written.
Doesn't it seem to be on there because it's the
commentary on
Hollywood going to Hollywood and what Hollywood does to you?
I am not against if someone tries to say that Mulholland Drive is David Lynch's best film.
Really fascinating. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, Doctor Strangelove made a lot of appearances on this list, but when I was going back through the list, like Doctor Strangelove isn't high. It's
not on here.
It's only 2001 that they always go back to, and it really hit me as I was going through all these lists of Kubrick's a director's director. Like inevitably, there's going to be some other.
Why is The Shining on the top 100?
And yeah, you have a former Razzie winner on the top 100 there. But anyways, an exercise. What I did, this is gonna take a second, but okay. I want to go over the top 10s of every list, and I want to point out to you guys how old these movies were when they were voted in. So in 1952, number 1 was Bicycle Thief. It was 4 years old at the time. Number 2, City Lights, 21 years old. Tied for second is Gold Rush, 27 years old. 4, Battleship Potemkin, 27 years old. 5, Intolerance, 36 years old. Tied for 5. Louisiana Story. Have you ever seen this?
No, I have not seen Louisiana.
Had you heard of it?
Yes,
I had not seen it. That's 4 years old. 7's Greed, 27 years old. Tied for 7 is Le Jour se Vive, 13 years. 7 tied for 7 also is Passion of Joan of Arc, 25 years old. 10, really new, Brief Encounter, only 6 years old. Also 10, Le Million, 21 years old. And then Rules of the Game, I didn't write down.
Brief Encounter. Wow, that sounds so. Nowadays, it sounds so frivolous to have that on the list. But it's great. It's a great.
A lot of these are just like interesting choice.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's just so.
Well, I didn't write any of the directors list down there. I've also heard the argument the directors list is maybe the one.
Strangelove's on the list.
Yeah, that one's on. But Lawrence of Arabia has been an appearance off and on.
Well, wait till we read up. Wait till we got the ones that got knocked off this year.
Oh, okay.
I have a list for you.
All right, then we go to 1962, which Citizen Kane finally comes in at number 1. It's 21 years old. 2 at only 2 years old is La Ventura. Number 3 is Rules of the Game, 23. Greed, 37 years old. Yugetsu is 9 years old. Battleship Potemkin is 37 years old. Bicycle Thief is 14 years old. Ivan the Terrible is 17 years old. La Terra Trema, which I'm unfamiliar with that, is 14 years old. And La Talente is 28 years old.
See, well, you think about Antonioni when he started mastering his style. So he said he's only 2 years old. He's on the poll. He's in the top 10 already.
Red Desert's 63. Has he made a movie since La Ventura between 60 and 63?
Well, La Eclipse is on it got knocked off.
Okay. Okay. I was just trying to. I'm doing the chronology. It was like.
But I'm thinking. So if that's true, can you imagine the impact that thing made if it's only 2 years old? And
I kind of can.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I mean, it must have been
well. It just seems like you always talk about.
We have something like that that's 2 years old.
Filmmakers
right now,
particularly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the newest one that was on a lot of filmmakers lists that I thought might etch in was Mad Max Fury Road. That got on a lot of filmmakers lists.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, what about? And in terms of impact, what do you think about Pulp Fiction? Should that?
Was any Tarantino movie on? Ooh, that is a big slight.
Yeah.
Wow.
You would think that maybe if Lynch is on there, if Lynch could make it with a couple, you would think Tarantino could be on there. I mean, like Eric and I the other night was like, don't get me wrong. We were just like throwing out directors. We're like, oh, Wes Anderson, P.T. Anderson, Aronofsky, all these different recent names that we just love. We rush to the theater to see, and none of them on. There's none of them on the top 100.
Well, Harold Bloom, I guess, apparently had come up with a phrase called the anxiety of influence. I didn't know that originated from him, but these people are like, just if you like. filmmakers talking about things that impress them, and maybe they don't want to fess up exactly on what has influenced them. But all these are, Tarantino in particular, very influential to every filmmaker. That is good. All right. And then to 1972, Citizen Kane still number 1, 31 years old. Rules of the Game 2, 33 years old. Battleship Potemkin, 47 years old. 8.5 is 9 years old. Love and Tour is now 12 years old. Persona is 6 years. Passion of Joan of Arc, 45 years old. The General is 46 years old. Magnificent Ambersons comes in at 30 years old. Yugetsu is 19, and Wild Strawberries at 15 years old.
Yeah, the General, I think, has a prominent place for a while, but I think now it's that romantic view of the South in the General might hurt it.
That's why.
Well, possibly. I mean, well, because that film's just a master. That's a freaking masterpiece, and it's down at the very bottom this year.
Well, the recurring thing of all these lists are there's a like. I find that there's a very silent cinema, not bias, but push. They want nonverbal cinema. They want pure, what's called quotes, pure cinema that does not use dialogue to tell its story. So silence are going to be, but I mean, you're noticing the pattern that these movies are getting older and we're staying the same is my point.
Exactly. Okay.
1982, Citizen Kane still number 1. Rules of the Game still number 2. Citizen Kane is 41 years old. Rules of the Game is 43 years old. Seven Samurai, first Kurosawa one, I think, in there. 28 years old. Singing in the Rain comes in at 31 years old, really high. 8.5 is 19 years old at 5. 6, Battleship Potemkin, 57 years old. 7, we have 3 sevens. Love and Tour, 22 years old. Magnificent Ambersons, 40 years old. Vertigo makes its first appearance at 24 years old. The General, 56 years. And The Searchers, 26 years.
What year? What year is that?
1982.
82.
I'm going to withhold the Vertigo rant until we get to it taking the number 1 spot. Do you want? I do want to bring up though one other thing I loved in Tarantino's book, him taking down The Searchers a peg.
Yeah, there's quite a few things. And that's. I remember when I discovered David Thompson's Encyclopedia Film, he would take down pegs on. Taking down these guys that were untouchable. I thought some of these directors, were totally. They're the greatest, and blah blah blah. And then also here's this major critic going, "Oh no, take a look at this and this," and I'm like, "Oh wow, okay." And maybe what you think, and then so the same thing with Tarantino.
I should be clear. I think The Searchers is a great movie, but it's very similar to my feelings on Vertigo, where it's like it is not the Morning Star. It is you might want to check our John Ford episode out. John Ford has made so many great movies, and it's just like I feel like people worship it just because they want an excuse to feel okay liking John Wayne, basically, because John Wayne's then a role conscious of like the mythos of the West and how he embodies that.
Well, that the end of the Fablemans with the office and the camera cranes pans around with all the Ford posters on the wall, and the music plays. And it's like, and you go, you better get a big gulp in if you're a film fan like we are.
I mean, we talked about this in the Ford episode, but one thing to admire about Ford is the pace and the quality.
Framing.
Well, I'm just saying, like, these things were immaculately made, and he's sometimes making 3 movies a year. All right, we are to 1992. Citizen Kane still in number 1 spot with 51 years old. Rules of the Game is still 2, 53 years old. Tokyo Story comes in at 39 years old. Vertigo moving up, 34 years old. Searchers still in there, 36 years old. La Talente comes back in, 58 years old. Battleship Potemkin, 67 years old. Passion of Joan of Arc, 65 years old. Panther Panchali, which I think was making its first appearance, 37 years old. And Kubrick finally comes in 2001, is 24 years old at 1992. No commentary.
I got so many things. I mean, so many thoughts rolling in my head. Just so why this particular decade, this year, and then is it there are different voters? What kind of voters are voting?
It feels like every year expanded. I had a number of voters, but they were these first few polls were surprisingly low. They would only have something like 60 to 70 people voting, critics. But I wanted to point out to you, nothing in 1992, none of these films is under 35 years old. Or excuse me, 2001 is 24. That was the youngest. Now we get to the 2002 list. Citizen Kane still there, 61-year-old, but creeping up, almost there. Vertigo at 44 years old, supplanting Rules of the Game back down to 3 at 63 years old. An apparition that got changed by 2012 was They decided to combine Godfather 1 and 2, which were 30 and 28 years old, or 38 and 20 years old, respectively. Number 5, Tokyo Story at 49 years old. 2001's 34. 7, Battleship Potemkin, 77. Also at 7, a favorite of mine, Sunrise, which is 75 years old at this point. Number 9, 8.5 is 39 years old. And Singin' in the Rain is 51 years old at number 10 in 2002. Okay, are we ready for the 2012 poll?
Sure.
My standard spiel about Vertigo being the quote, greatest movie of all time is I don't even think it's barely in my top 5 Hitchcock movies from the 50s. Because my number 1, Strangers on a Train. 2 would be probably Rear Window. Then North by Northwest. Then maybe Dial M for Murder. And then it's a question of, do I think Vertigo's better than the Man Who Knew Too Much remake? Vertigo is an...
But you understand... See, I'm really surprised that...
Vertigo's problem is that it's celebrated because it's Hitchcock's subtext is made text into a movie. And yet then the plot is bizarre, doesn't feel like it worked. It's an oddly structured movie. It's got this bizarre two-part.
But people like De Palma and Schrader, when they saw it, they came out and wrote Obsession and did Obsession because of
That's
Vertigo.
Fine.
I mean, I'm thinking.
I also have that thing where De Palma's remade Vertigo, I think, like 3 times. Between that, Femme Fatale, Body Double.
I just yes, they're not. Vertigo is not as is not a crowd pleaser in some ways.
That's fine.
And I know, but but that's why I think it gets dogged on because Hitchcock is so worshipped. And then there's the Rear Window. There's
well, it also got a lot of love for being the forgotten
Psycho,
Hitchcock movie too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just really surprised that, like a filmmaker, like you're a filmmaker, that you understand what he's doing with this film, right? But you're just putting your more entertaining films over that just because it's not entertaining.
No, just because I don't think the subtext is that interesting. I think like when you're
as a filmmaker, I think it would be.
I guess you're just basically saying I've been in charge of a lot of blondes and I control them in an interesting way. Like that's not a.
Well, it's also what a film, but in a general sense, is what a filmmaker does too, and not just. I mean, he's got a blonde, but
I think people overplay the confessional aspect to that. I just don't find that as interesting as it's like Rear Window is way much more interesting commentary on film going than Vertigo is. Like I'm more interested in what I as an audience member than I am like about.
So, what is your theory? Then, what do you make of it being so high? Then
a few things. I think just Hitchcock being kind of. A few years away from Hitchcock Truffaut book and getting it's the forgotten Hitchcock movie because it was lost. It seemed like it was quasi lost forever. Again, him making the subtext text and him being confessional is appealing to some people. It's just, not me, man.
I would be just as loopy as just to go. Let's just put Psycho at number 1. I mean, in terms of just...
I would be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean...
I would be totally fine with that. Strangers on a Train is the great underrated Hitchcock movie to me, though.
I don't know underrated, that's the right word for it, but...
Maybe not underrated. And to be fair, I think if you made the argument
your Dial M is underrated. You've got Dial M on your top 10. Yeah, that's pretty underrated.
Yeah. I've never seen it in 3D. I've always wanted to see it in 3D. But Strangers on a Train, if you made the argument to me, even that you didn't like it, but you're like, oh, yeah, but the merry-go-round sequence is... one of the greatest sequences.
Is it a possibility that the academics and the real hoity-toity guys, the critics, they're going to say, "Well, we got to put Hitchcock," but I'm not going to. I'm going to.
I can't put his most popular movie there.
Yeah, I can put the one that pleases us the most, and let's put something that is problematic and makes you think, and that's Vertigo. In terms of it's just not a pop. You can't. That's the thing. In America, it was the French critics that said, "Hey, wait a minute, this guy's an artist." We were just like he's a popcorn maker. We eat popcorn and enjoy his films.
I think that's fair. I mean, a lot of the questions of a canon going back to earlier what I was talking about. It seems like the point of a canon is to bring it down, but also to give argue against it. I mean, that's the point of lists. Like these are my favorites. Here's what I agree with. I haven't seen that. I should see that. I disagree with how high
Well,
you
seems
put
like that personal list I came up with. I love to share that with people because they go, "Oh, I've never heard of that. What is this one? What is this one?" Whereas opposed to everybody's sort of wants
But
rating.
you know the trick that why a list sometimes can be as cold as opposed to when you're talking to someone and telling them your list.
Yeah,
You are selling them on the movie
right.
with your enthusiasm with how much you love the movie.
Exactly.
When you just put down on paper in numbered order, like it's a gauntlet's thrown down, and you're like, it's also like a impress me. Um, well, anyway, finishing up the 2012 list, Vertigo was 54 years old at number 1. Citizen Kane, now at number 2, is 71 years old. Tokyo Story, 59 years old. Rules of the Game, 63 years old. Sunrise is 85 years old right this. Number 6, 2001 is 44 years old. Number 7, The Searchers, 56 years old. Making it a really cool appearance, a movie I love. Man with a Movie Camera is 83 years old. Number 9, Passion of Joan of Arc, 85 years old. And 8 and a half is 49 years old.
Yeah, Eric tells me like you mentioned you were pointing out how old is Sunrise, but he'll show his class that city scene out of Sunrise and just like, look at this. It's a silent film. Look how amazing
How
this is.
visually sophisticated
Yeah.
that thing is.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't believe they pull out. And then on the 2022 list, Jeanne Dielman makes its appearance, 47 years old. Vertigo, 64 years old. Citizen Kane is now 81 years old. Tokyo Story, 69 years old. In the Mood for Love is at 9, 22 years old. 2001 is 54 years old. Beau Travail is 24 years old. Mulholland Drive is 21 years old. Man with the Movie Camera is 93 years old. And Singing in the Rain at number 10, 71 years old. And we're up to date.
Maybe I'm just not sophisticated enough. Maybe I'm not. I don't really think I want to be a smarter person. I don't think I'm that smart when I read it. And I remember when I first started attacking at foreign films, I remember thinking, I'm really dumb. I don't understand this. I'm really dumb.
I gotta read films.
And I finally, over the years, I've finally started to, I've evolved a little bit, hopefully. But I don't know. So with that in mind, I don't know if I would put Beau Travail and In the Mood of Love. Do they deserve to be that high?
I don't think I mean, again, I haven't seen Beau Travail.
Yeah.
That was the one big one on the top
I need
10.
to revisit it because I think I scratched my head on that first.
Claire Denis obviously become very influential in the last few years and
Yes.
beloved. In the Mood for Love. See, here's the thing: is Wong Kar-wai's, and I feel like his reputation's kind of gone down the last few years.
Yeah, well, and he's kind of slowed down too. This is like this productivity.
But In the Mood for Love is very expressionistic, kind of amazing movie.
Right, but it's also would you consider that slow cinema?
Like in the Schrader list, like compared to like Bellatar or something.
Well, yeah, that's really slow. Bellatar.
No, I wouldn't.
But what about?
I don't think I would.
Now,
I don't think I would.
Does the Ackerman film? Since you've seen it,
yes, that is slow cinema.
It's almost on the verge of being documentarian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of like wide frames where you watch her like cooking.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I got a sense that was so impactful. The length of it is because it stays with a scene and the detail of life.
I haven't read all Schrader's book, but the trick of a lot of slow cinema is that like it's the rhythm lulls you into when something really big happens, like the impact is that much more amplified.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what happens with Jeanne Dielman, yeah.
I'm just thinking, here's, for example, one film I think probably deserves to be in the top 10. And I don't know if it's ever been, I think it hasn't been on, I don't know if it has been on the list or not. I didn't do all my homework here. The original King Kong.
So, I was going to eventually go down some other individual people's lists, and I have our former guest, Tim Lucas, and King Kong's on his list.
Yeah, that's what made me think of it. I'm like, oh my gosh. Anytime I watch King Kong, I marvel at it. It absolutely never. I never get bored with King Kong. I marvel at it and contextually and even just.
Well, something you're pointing out, I think, that is missing almost entirely from the list. 2001 is an exception, but for the most part, spectacle. These lists really do not have any appreciation for, and spectacle is a pretty significant part of what makes movies cinema and work,
Mr. Spielberg put the world's greatest story on it.
I can't remember the exact quote, but there's Truffaut said that what cinema does best is like intimacy and spectacle combined.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I've always thought like Lawrence of Arabia. One reason it's such a great film is it's a little small scenes, and little things you can quote that are small amongst this big giant canvas,
Right.
of a film.
Yeah.
So. You want to hear the ones that got knocked off?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of
do.
interesting. We got Greed.
Okay. What do you think of that?
What do you do about damaged films? Greed's a very damaged film, even though it's pretty good.
I felt that way in Magnificent Ambersons. Like I really want to love Magnificent Ambersons, but like when you read about I've complained to you about this. Every time I rewatch it, I'm just like I can see the seams.
Yeah, I'm Pat Garrett Billy Kid, another damaged film, but some call it a masterpiece. So. But I don't know. Does it deserve to be on there when it's got problems?
There's also the ones like currently there's that really cool campaign to try to find the lost cut of Magnificent Ambersons, but there's always that feeling that like, look, if it's really lost, we have to acknowledge this is what we got. This is the finished movie. Pat Garrett, Billy Kid's probably that way too. Where
Intolerance. I butchered this name. It's the one.
I think Intolerance going off is just the everyone really wanting to stick it to Birth of a Nation kind of. Even though if Intolerance is
Griffith, get out of here. We don't.
That and Broken Blossoms are supposed to be his apology. But
the Bonnell's slash the eyeball film.
Unchained Andalou,
which is a short too. That's off.
Well, I mean, how many shorts were? That's interesting.
Yeah, there's several shorts on there. There's one documentary, but two more Renoir, Jean Renoir.
Renoir.
Yeah, Grand Illusion, and then one I'm not even sure of. I don't know what the English title of it is. Partie de Campagne. Partie de Campagne.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have to look at that.
I'm blanking. I think I've read it. Maybe if I read it, because this is how this works for us. We read them. We don't say them out loud.
My academic chops are. I'm exposing my Achilles heels here.
When was the last time you were in France? Me, never.
The Magnificent Ambersons. What we already mentioned, Touch of Evil.
That one hurts. If you go to my Letterboxd page, Touch of Evil is on my top 4 of all time, probably.
Another Michael Powell film got knocked off. I mean, there's still 2 on the list.
What got knocked off?
The Life and Death of Conor Blamp.
A big Scorsese favorite. I need to rewatch that, but I don't remember being as blown away by that as some of the other Arrows movies.
Now these next 2 are surprising. I'm going to go with the English version of the French title, Children of Paradise.
Okay.
That's a film that just like when you read about it, you hear about it, you see pictures of it, and then I finally saw it, and it lived up to the reputation. I did not disappoint.
The Jean Vigo movies that are on this list, that I was forever before I finally got up to them, and like that was the same way with those.
Yeah, and then the other one, of course, is Lawrence of Arabia. It's amazing they got it's off the list. And then La Eclipse, The Wild Bunch is off.
That's an interesting choice.
Yeah.
I mean, like if this list is the corrective is to get machismo off here.
Yeah. Aquari, The Wrath of God.
Interesting. Okay.
So I guess there's no Herzog on the list, probably. Chinatown.
Oh,
that's probably because of Polanski, I guess, in this day and age.
If that's true, then I mean, it's just weird. I guess the politics of it makes sense.
Godfather 2.
I find that baffling.
Nashville. No Altman's on the list. Either.
No Altman. Not even McKay, Mrs. Miller.
I don't think so.
Oh
sure.
Wow.
And then
the filmmakers list blended it a lot in for me.
Yeah, that's true. And then Raging Bull. And I'm thinking, I myself, if I was they would send me the list and I was voting on it, I would put. I don't think I'd put Goodfellas on the top 100. I would certainly put Raging Bull on there, but I wouldn't.
So wait, Goodfellas is now supplanted.
Goodfellas is on the list. Is in the list.
Is that the only Scorsese on the list?
Taxi Driver's on there. That's it.
Okay.
So.
Wow,
Raging Bull. That's pretty amazing.
Well, the other big question I want to ask you about is, we try to detail why this was the big list for a lot of people. And I think it's an interesting choice, and it's not something that was specifically done to this expansion. Like, it's not something that was like, but what does this do to the credibility of the list, especially in an era where lists are everywhere? And, you know,
I think the only advantage they have is that they've been doing it since '52, and it has some gravitas to it a little bit in this day and age that nothing has gravitas to it.
well,
In this
but
day
I
and
mean,
age is so fleeting. So hopefully, there is. If a kid comes up to me and says, what should I start watching? Something you could hand this to them and say, well, this is a good place to start.
especially if you're interested in world cinema.
Yeah, because you need something. I just every year I hear people, a lot of my friends, I go, "Well, this is a bad year in cinema. This is an up year. This is a down year."
Yeah,
I never think that.
I
I
know.
never
Me
do
neither.
because there's so much to see, and I never see it. And all of a sudden, it's like I had this 2 or 3 films on my list to see, or I even bought the Blu-ray and put it on my shelf. And it's like 3 years later, I still haven't watched it, or I haven't had a chance.
That's a Ted specialty there.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to or an opportunity to watch it.
So wait, or how are you going to watch John Dielman now? Are you going to have people over and do a thing?
Well, actually, over a couple people, college people, said let's have a viewing party over the holidays because they haven't seen it either.
I'd be down for it. I mean, it's like a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's, that was
I'm-
one thing that helped me.
I'm
out
just
with
afraid-
watching for a while.
I almost want to watch it by myself first because you get in a group of friends, and if this is slow and meticulous, I can see us also start talking during it, and I don't want any interruptions or talking. I'm a pretty concentrated film watcher.
No. If you're seeing the newly coronated greatest film of all time, and you start talking in the middle of it,
Well, it could be. That could happen.
I could totally see it happening. I'm just saying, like, ugh.
Yeah, because it's not going to be like bouncy, fun stuff.
I mean, it is. I mean, I want to hear your reaction to it. It's.
That's the thing. And that's another thing. People don't want to. And this is not a slam on anybody. It's like people want to watch films, be entertained. And people have different levels and interests of entertainment. I like challenges. I like problematic things, and I mean that's what I'm kind of as a diehard film fan, wannabe filmmaker a long time ago. I really started appreciating like what are they trying to say here? What's going on? And and leave the film thinking I got to think about this. I got to figure this out. What's going on here? And most people don't want to. A lot of people don't want to do that. That's and that plays into the list. What do you should Raiders of the Lost Ark be on the list?
Yeah.
I mean.
I think there's always, I mean, it gets typified in the critic versus the average audience member debate, but there is this question of like, I mean, it goes back even to the question of like, what is your favorite film and what is the top 10? Because like a lot of this to me vibes with the top 10 people submitted for this list is what we think we should all agree on, as opposed to the 10 movies that have I've enjoyed the most. Or taught me the most.
And I keep on have to remind myself I'm in a minority. I run across people at work, my friends, and they're super enthusiastic and diehard about films, but it's only a certain type of films, and they don't want to get outside that envelope. And I gotta appreciate that.
I was gonna say, especially as I get older, like I just keep feeling like as much as. I always frame the question as how many movies have you seen? Because the thing is, if you've seen 10,000 movies, you've seen 10,000 plots, so therefore it's harder to impress you with a new plot. But if you've seen 3,000 or 2,000, you are easily impressed with the same old plot that you've seen multiple times. But I feel like the reaction of if people are into film at any level, it's a legit reaction. We all think and live in stories.
Right. Well, yeah, but now we get into being elitist, or I don't.
Yeah, I think it's a debate that's going to be constant correcting amongst ourselves and with others. So it's an interesting conversation to continue to have.
Because with Quentin, you just listen to his podcast, read his book, or see his films, and he's gonna almost like making you rethink about these exploitation films. Like, wait a minute, this is some cool stuff to check out. I mean, I've a lot of the films that he's just slobbering over. I remember the bit in the theater. I remember the movie ads. I remember the reviews. And they were kind of like, and I would pass on it. And
Yeah.
he's just slobbering over him. I'm like, well, I better go back and check that out now.
But there's some you've seen that you see what he's talking, and you did
Oh
enjoy
yeah,
that. You see what he's
yeah.
talking
I mean,
about.
but not. I was more of a, vanilla view. My dad, my dad influenced my taste probably because it was dad driving to the theater and he could see what he wanted to see. So we saw most like. I'm thinking like, why didn't we see any Jerry Lewis films? They were still playing when I was a kid. That'd be a good film. That would be a good thing to drop me off to see or whatever. But I think Dad never wanted to see Jerry Lewis films. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how did my taste develop, and how did I get into the place I'm at.
I don't know if we'll ever have an answer on what are the objectively top 10 greatest films of all
No.
time.
Um,
What is the format? Who's an agreement? And do we all have to abide by this, the choosings of the Science Sound poll? But it's an interesting list. I have a lot more movies to watch now because of the list, so I'm happy. But
yeah, I'm kind of glad to see newer ones pop in there and
totally.
and shake it up a little bit.
Per all my reading of those, how old those movies were, like this did seem like a lot of newer movies in here.
And of course, with the internet, the digital world now, it's so easy accessible. We have, first of all, we have a great access to the most of the films, and then also you can go back to the older list, and if
That's a very valid point.
and say, okay, this got knocked out, but it was on the list for like 3 or 4 of them, so I should probably check that out too.
And I mean, curation is all the big question where people like when streamers are shoveling too much content at us, like trying to figure out what to watch. This is still a good guide.
Yeah, and more documentaries possibly need to be on. Do they, or should they be on there? Should shorts be on there? There were 2 animated Miyazaki films, 2 animations.
Oh yeah.
So I'm thinking,
that
was that should there missing some other animation films on there? And I'm also thinking, I know you're going to roll your eyes when I say this one, but it's not because of Lester, but because Hard Day's Night. I think Hard Day's
I'd be
Night,
fine with that.
Hard Day's Night, and maybe Don't Look Back. Because they changed rock and roll films.
And I do want to finally say, based on the controversy, like where I'm at right now is even if it was a thumb on the scale, I think a 12-year-old girl who wants to maybe get into filmmaking right now, as opposed to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, just sees this as much more of a possibility now. And they can see other women filmmakers that like, I can make something like that. And then there's just this general feeling I have that like if the canon's going to change because more women voices are voting into it, then your perception on what a movie is good about a movie is like you listen.
No, we definitely need it. Yeah.
What do women film goers want, like is something that maybe needs more of a voice. So this is a good thing for that.
Yeah, get this. There was only 2 females of 10 years ago.
Really?
And now there's 11.
What were the 2 10 years ago?
Ackerman and Claire Denis.
Have you seen Daughters of the Dust?
No.
Okay, I have seen that. Yeah, that was an interesting choice, I thought.
But 11 films, 11 females. And then 10 years ago, there was only 1 black filmmaker.
Really? What was it?
That
Killer Sheep.
Tuki Buki. It's on. I think it's still on the list. And then, but it's now there's 7 films by blacks on there. But Moonlight, I was like really surprised. I was kind of neat to see that pop up there, like in there.
Well, Do the Right Thing was in the top 30 now.
Yeah. I didn't look. I didn't do like again. I didn't look at the last list like you did. What's Wild on the West was on the list last 10 years ago.
Well, I mainly only looked at the top 10s.
Yeah, he laid on. He's hanging on there by. He's the one that ties.
I think he was on
95th tie.
He was on Tim Lucas's list. Real quickly, I wanted to get in a few more people's list, even though we don't have access to the thing. John Carpenter's list was Only Angels Have Wings, Chimes at Midnight, Rio Bravo, The Street Charm of the Bourgeoisie, Chinatown, Bringing Up Baby, The Searchers, The Exterminating Angel, Scarface, and
the director's
Vertigo.
The director's voting also were included on the main list, the main one.
I believe so. Yeah, this would be of the directors.
So they're spread over. Their top 10 was on and counted on each list.
Yeah. I mean, these are their submissions for the director's lists.
Director's list, but not the overall list.
No, this is for the director's list.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood. Michael Mann got a lot of shit in 2012 because he put Avatar on his list. His current list is Apocalypse Now, Battleship Potemkin, both 2012, and now he put Inarritu's Beautiful. You know, the one with Javier Bardem?
Oh, okay.
He put Doctor Strangelove on there. He put Citizen Kane on there. Passion of Joan of Arc. He put Raging Bull. Out of the Past. Pale Flower. And Confessions? I think that's a newer movie. From 2010, a Japanese masterpiece, frighteningly controlled, rigid, it's unheralded high art. It was his commentary on that. Then getting to Scorsese's list, Bong Joon-ho put in Psycho, The Housemaid, Rocco and His Brothers, Vengeance is Mine, Raging Bull, A City of Sadness, Cure, Zodiac, Mad Max Fury Road, and Happy as Lazaro. And Scorsese's list, which he goes over the 10, which he's done like every time. 2001, 8.5, Ashes and Diamonds, Citizen Kane, Diary of a Country Priest, Ikaru, The Leopard, Ordette, Paesa, The Red Shoes, The River, Salvatore Giuliano. I don't know that one movie. The Searchers, Yugetsu, and Vertigo. If you haven't seen these movies, go see them. There's movies I haven't seen too. So
it's interesting. Scorsese shows he's not doing contemporary films. He's doing obviously.
Scorsese's going to Scorsese.
Yeah. Whereas I think Carpenter said, "Screw it." I'm putting the bulk of his list is like stuff that he just loves. Whether they're good, all good, but I'm just saying. He's not going to play because I would double think myself. I was like, okay, I need to put something important on.
Well, I don't have Edgar Wright's list on here, but like naturally he put American Werewolf in London on there.
And that would be. I bet that just did a number on him when he saw it as a kid.
I mean, he mentions that movie all the time.
Yeah, I got a soft spot for that film too, just because of the tonal changes in the thing.
Sure. All right, so I guess that's a curatorial list of what to watch from.
Yeah, I think don't you think the bottom line here, folks, is that don't fret it, don't get upset, and just use the list as a guidepost, and then make up your own list, or don't worry with this list, but you're going to see a lot of good films.
Either way, you're going to see a lot of good films.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for this episode. Ted, thank you for joining me again.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Hope we keep doing this again more consistently.
Yes.